All right, I uploaded your complete medical history and I had AI cook up the perfect workout for you based on your health conditions. Here we go. Today, 100 sets of 10 squats at 315. That is your workout. If you have any issues, talk to the bots. I'm out of here. Master Coach.
I'm not going to be able to walk for days if I don't end up in the hospital with rhabdomyolysis.
But that's a robot problem.
Like, come
that's
on.
a robot problem. Talk to the bots.
Passing off the liability.
Oh, I can't. You mean I can't use AI for absolutely everything, completely risk-free and pass off all liability?
Oh, Mike, it would be so nice if we could. My job would be so much easier.
Okay, well, if that's the case, we should dig into that. We'll help some gym owners use AI properly without opening themselves up to massive liability. This is Run a Profitable Gym. I'm Mike Warkentin. Please hit subscribe wherever you're watching or listening with my thanks. My guest today, Matthew Becker of gymlawyers.com. He's the former owner of Industrial Athletics in Pittsburgh. He's our go-to when we have a legal question for gym owners. So Matthew, welcome. I don't actually do that workout I gave you.
What's up, Mike? No, it's all good. I did a bunch of thrusters last week and like I couldn't walk for the rest of the week. So no, I'm not going to do, I don't even know if I could back squat 315 anymore. It's sad to admit. But.
You know, we won't make you do that workout and find out when you get buried at what rep. But we are, you and I used to joke about this. It wasn't that long ago. It was maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Yeah. We used to joke about gym owners who downloaded waivers from the internet and then used to find and replace to alter complex legal documents with the click of a button and then run with it. And we thought that was pretty funny, but things have gone way, way further now with AI. So lay it out for us. What are the biggest risks gym owners face when using AI now?
Yeah. So it goes beyond just like using AI to draft your legal documents. I mean, sure, we don't want to do that. We can get into why we don't want to do that. But regardless of what we talk about throughout the rest of the episode, I want the gym owners to really think about one of three different sort of legally issues, if you will, with using AI. So anytime we use AI to do something within our business, we're going to potentially open ourselves up to one of these three problems. One, we're going to extend outside the scope of our practice. And we can talk about sort of like in what instances that might come up. Two, we're going to increase our legal exposure. We may weaken our ability to fight against lawsuits, say for personal injury or credit card dispute or something like that. And then, the third problem is we're potentially bringing on more liability that we could be passing off to others if we use other professionals to do something instead of just trying to rely on AI to say, again, draft our legal documents, do our accounting, come up with our tax issues or resolve our tax issues. So again, those three kind of in summary is going outside of our scope of practice, increasing our exposure, and eliminating the ability to pass off liability onto other professionals. So pretty much everything we're going to talk about is going to fall into one of those three categories.
Well, let's nail the first one. Let's look at scope of practice because this is a really important one and you can definitely take some odd steps here because you're just feeding everything to the bots and it's an expert on everything and you can sometimes get into some gray areas. So lay out this one. Where should scope of practice sit with relation to AI?
Yeah, so if we go back like before AI, right? There will be like a what would it be? Not like a BC and an AD, right? But like
it's the dark ages of some sort, like 2 years ago.
Post-COVID, we're gonna have pre-post AI. Anyway, we used to you and I had talked a little bit about it, and Coop used to put material out about like scope of practice outside of let's say nutrition. And so the age-old question of like how much can I actually prescribe to my clients revolving around nutrition, and can I do macros, and can I just do healthy habits? And we would see things there about like going outside of your scope of practice because your state says if you're going to prescribe macros, you need to be a registered dietitian, something
regulated
like that.
Professions. Yeah.
Yep. If you're going to offer some kind of physical therapy, you need to be a registered physical therapist. If you're going to offer some sort of massage to your clients, you need to be a massage therapist. There are professional licenses that we need if we're going to do things outside of like what we learned in our CrossFit level 1 trainers certification, right? Or I should say trainer certificate. It's not a certification anyway. So so to kind of bring this around, where this comes into an issue now is like now that I have AI and AI is an educated physical therapist, if I've got a client that comes in with, say, like a ruptured disc in his back, and I want to be like, I'm the go-to for everything. In the past, I'd be like, I don't know how to fix a ruptured disc. So I'm going to either bring in a physical therapist or I'm going to send you out to a physical therapist. And we've talked in the past about, or like Two Brain about, like you create your professional network. So you have a professional referral network within your community. I don't need that now, right? I can just go to ChatGPT and be like, hey, I've got a client that's got a ruptured disc in his back. I want to help my client fix this. Give me a month's worth of programming to fix my client's ruptured disc, right?
There it is.
There it is. And then I go in and I start rehabbing my client and their ruptured disc. I've extended outside of my scope of practice as a CF level 2.
Yep. And that's super common. You mentioned nutrition. That happens a lot. Certain states very regulated, some states not regulated very much at all. And it just depends on where you are. But you can't diagnose and treat injuries as a personal trainer. You can't give, precise diet plans in certain places and so forth. Healthy habits is a way around that. But the scope of practice, the same as it was 20 years ago, still exists as a personal trainer. It doesn't change because AI gives you more access to information. Is that essentially what we're getting at?
Yeah. You can use it to educate yourself.
Sure.
But the moment that, and this especially becomes more difficult as we get more confident and comfortable with the information that we're getting from AI, that all of a sudden during our no sweat intro, I say, you know what, Mike? I've helped other people fix their ruptured discs in your back. Ooh. I've got a program for you.
Uh-oh.
That's where we have a problem. It's fine using it to educate myself on how to help you fix your ruptured disc. But the moment that I start holding myself out as the person who can help you fix your ruptured disc, now I've exceeded my scope of practice and we've got a problem.
And that's where you start getting into that like duty of care, negligence, and errors. And that was what the scope of practice was designed to limit in the first place, meaning like as a personal trainer, I may not be qualified to tell you exactly what to eat to address a medical condition, right? Because they just don't work. One education set does not transfer to the other one. This is the same situation, and you can really get yourself into some issues here if you start playing outside where you're at. So let me give you a scenario. Let's say I do have a client with a ruptured disc, and I say, here's the workout I had planned for a client with a ruptured disc. Let's talk about some things that would allow this person to still work out even around that condition without treating or diagnosing or doing anything to rehab that condition. What are some common modifications that have worked for other people? I get that printout, I review it as a qualified personal trainer and create a workout plan designed to allow that person to work without, pain-free, according to the, the advice of the care provider. Would something like that work?
Yeah. And that kind of starts to go into like scope or issue number 3. Again, we're kind of going by issue number 1, 2, and 3 here, right? So are we outside of our scope of practice? Maybe not, because there's nothing wrong with educating yourself as a trainer, right? There's nothing wrong with reading a book on kinesiology in order to understand the body better so that you can better increase the dorsiflexion of your client. There's nothing wrong with that. But are we doing it in a way that puts us into issue number 2, where now we're increasing our exposure? Unfortunately, the more information that you have, the more information you're giving your client, the more potential you are for having a negligent duty of care in what you're delivering to your client, right? That's why we have malpractice insurance and things like that, because the more educated we are, the more likely we are to mess up, unfortunately. Okay. So yes, you can educate yourself. You can use that education in order to better service your client. You are increasing your exposure a little bit, but then we get into that third area of now we don't have anybody to pass that liability off to if there is a problem, because let's go down that scenario and I use my education in order to adjust and modify, and I do it improperly and you get injured. You sue me, we end up in court, I'm sitting on the stand and I'm being grilled at, well, why did I have you do X, Y, Z? And I say, well, because I went and used ChatGPT in order to teach me how to fix somebody. So I educated myself and I used it in my scope of practice in order to better service my client. Well, I'm now absorbed all of that liability because I can't push that liability off on Chat to be like, well, that's what Chat told me to do. Whereas if I called up my physical therapist buddy and I said, hey, I've got this guy, he's got a ruptured disc. I need some modifications or programming in order to better provide service to my client. And then you get injured and you sue me. I can be like, well, I called a professional and that's what the professional told me to do. I can push that exposure of that liability off onto that other professional. So that's why we have those 3 different types of potential exposure or issues when we're using AI.
So increased exposure is essentially you're maybe not outside your scope of practice, but you're definitely like expanding things in a bit, let's not say it's a gray area, I guess, for lack of a better term, where you're not clearly doing something wrong, but you are taking some steps in a larger direction. And AI can really be a rabbit hole for that, because it's like, gives you all the stuff. And then it says, would you like this? You're like,
would you like more?
Would you like this? Yeah. Would you like a complete back rehab training plan? Yep. And like, ooh, so is that the essence of the exposure, where you just start doing more and all of a sudden the scope of everything gets broader and you're starting to work at the edges of that scope of practice?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you may end up going outside of the scope of practice as far as your insurance is concerned too, because you end up going down that rabbit hole where you're right. Like if I read a book and I have a question, I got to go seek out the answer to that question further. If I go to chat and I say, hey, give me this workout, and then I got a question, like it's doing a really darn good job of predicting my next question and just feeding me the answer.
Yeah.
So I don't want gym owners to walk away from this being like, well, I can't educate myself. Matt said, what do you mean I can't educate? That's not what we're doing. It's a fantastic tool. Just understand that you do still have limits on what you're doing as a trainer. And it doesn't make you Superman just because literally the answers are at your fingertips more than ever before.
This question, I think, is going to lead into passing off liability bucket 3, but I'm going to ask it with relation to the second thing you said. And it's just about, can I use this stuff, and can I get a program or programming ideas or workout ideas and then review that carefully as an expert personal trainer, put something together that I approve and that I'm not passing it off. I'm not saying the robots did this. I'm saying I got some ideas here and I've evaluated them. I've set this up according to my scope of practice and professional standards, the knowledge that I have. Is that less risky?
Yeah, I definitely think it is. That's sort of the old trust but verify answer too, right? And I think that's where, like, yes, we're telling everybody to be cautious, but we're not telling people like don't do it in its fullest extent. But sure, if you're going to ask chat to design an entire program for you or design a nutrition plan or something, don't just turn around and copy paste it into a Word. Eliminate the lines that chat seems to love to put in everything that makes it so clear that this came from AI. Just and change it to Times New Roman, and then send it out and use it as your own. That's fine. No, chat didn't help. But use it, get the education, get the program, but then check it also to make sure that it is actually accurate within your own education, your own knowledge. And if it puts something in there that you're like, that doesn't really seem accurate, look it up, like dive a little bit deeper to make sure that you're not just reproducing something that is increasing your exposure because you tried to do it super fast and you didn't want to waste the time reviewing what was produced by the AI.
Yeah. And that's good advice for literally anything you would do with those programs, like anything that you would ask, review them because they're not perfect. And sometimes it'll say something to me and I'll be like, dude, are you sure that you're right. He got me away. That's not correct. And like, well, what, because everybody runs into those ones where it's like, I made a mistake. Like, oh, that could be very costly if it was like, which is the number one stock to pick and so forth. But I could see something like this where I could say, I have a client who wants to build bigger glutes. Give me, according to the research out there, the top 5 exercises for glute activation. And it's like, done. I'm like, hey, I really like this one, these glute bridges with a plate or whatever it is. I'm going to use those and I'm going to program this in 3 sets of 8 to 10 because that's the hypertrophy range. And we're going to do rest about 40 seconds. I'm all in my scope of practice. I'm just using the thing for idea generation, but then I'm doing the hard work, like the heavy lifting on that. I love stuff like that. I also love stuff like this where I could say, hey, I've got this pretty ugly workout program. Could you format this and make it look pretty and professional? Stuff like that's great. It's not changing your stuff. I love all of that. So those are some ways to use things safely because let's be real, like you said, people aren't not going to use AI, but there are some cautions there. And let's dig into that other one. Let's dig into the one about like the passing off of liability, because this is a big one where it's very easy to wash your hands and say, oh, that was a robot error. But like the Matrix isn't taking responsibility for that.
Right. Yep. And that's where, use the professionals. Don't use chat as a way to get around using other professionals. And I think this, maybe I'm a little bit, biased or whatever, that like people are trying to do a lot to save money, say on hiring professional services. They're like, well, I can just put my taxes into chat and it'll tell me how to file my taxes. I don't need to pay a CPA to do it. Or I can just have chat write a liability waiver for me. I don't need to pay an attorney to do it. Or my, partnership agreement, I don't need to pay an attorney to do that. And meanwhile, now not only is the gym owner increasing their own exposure, but they're taking on the professional liability of doing something that there are trained professionals out there to do. If you get sued, if you use chat to draft a liability waiver and you put that in front of the client and the client get injured, chat's not going to be the one suing you. An attorney is going to be the one that's going to sue you. That client is going to actually hire a professional to do it. So you should probably hire a professional to protect against that. Mm-hmm. And if the waiver that chat produced is in violation of your state laws and the entire thing becomes null and void from the court, you don't have anybody to pass that exposure off on. Right. If I draft the waiver and it's in violation of your state laws and it all becomes null and void, that's called malpractice. That's what malpractice is for. That's right. You can now come back and you can push that exposure off on me as the attorney to say, right, you drafted this for me and it's wrong. I'm now threatened with a lawsuit for personal injury. That's my problem as the attorney.
And that's where insurance kicks in, right? Like that's where those things come in a lot of cases. Like maybe not exactly that one, but insurance is there to cover up for some liability, right? And if you invalidate it, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, except the number one reason that you're going to be denied, as gym owner is going to be denied insurance coverage is if they didn't have a liability waiver or they didn't have a liability waiver covering the service that they were offering. Right. That's going to be the insurance's first opportunity to be like, not my cover, not our fault. Same thing with me. That's why I have to carry malpractice insurance is because humans are infallible. And if I screw up, I need to be able to, I don't want that coming out of my pocket. But, to your point, if you mess up your taxes and all of a sudden you owe $50,000 to the feds, you can't be like, I'm suing chat because chat did my taxes wrong. Like I'm suing OpenAI. They're going to be like, it literally says at the bottom, you cannot take this as legal advice. You cannot take this as accounting advice. Use a professional. So you're absorbing professional liability that you don't have to because there are professionals out there that are trained to do this.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this one about the one I hinted at in the intro that we scripted there. The confidential information stuff where you're uploading, some medical stuff or credit card numbers into the cloud, wherever that goes. Like where are we at with that? How does that work?
So with something like personal medical information, I was talking with my wife before we started recording. She was a nurse and sort of thinking about like how would a gym owner use that? Because I was like, if you've got like a slipped disc, I'll just keep going with the slipped disc or the ruptured disc or something in your back. I don't necessarily have to go on and be like, I'm working with a client named Mike and he is X years old from this place in Canada. And he, that's all personally identifiable information that is going to put us into like, this is potentially a HIPAA violation because chat is not, a recognized program to protect against personally identifiable information for medical reasons. But there could be a reason that I would do that with credit cards or other personally identifiable information that, I wanted chat to create a database for all of my clients so that I can track my affinity marketing or something like that. Now I'm putting in really sensitive information that's not protected in any way and is a breach of probably a breach of privacy for a lot of my client information that I'm now, again, increasing my exposure because I'm giving private information over to ChatGPT that is not a protected, locked down system.
Yeah, and we don't know exactly what happens to that stuff. It just goes up in the cloud and, God knows what they do with it, right? Like, but it's there. It's there if they want to look at it. Someone can do something with it. So would you advise people, because I know people are doing this. I guarantee people are firing all sorts of information into things and saying, organize this, make this look better, give me a report on this. Would you advise them not to do that?
I think you have to be very careful about what information you're giving over to chat or, Gemini. We don't have to pick on ChatGPT this entire time. I'm sure
any of them. Feelings. Yeah. Whatever it is.
Yeah. We can pick on Gemini too. Sure. But, any of the information that we're putting in there, we have to now understand that we've just basically, you and I talked once before about this, Mike, and you came up to the analogy of like, if I wouldn't leave that information sitting on a table at a coffee shop when I get up to go to the bathroom, I probably shouldn't put it into ChatGPT as well, because we don't know. They claim that what I'm talking to ChatGPT about, Chat is not using to educate itself to go over and answer somebody else's answer. But I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of just trusting that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know that I could ever prove that, or they could ever disprove it, or anything else. But they do admit that Chat uses information that is out there on the internet in order to educate itself, to provide better answers, and it's constantly learning with that stuff. So you just have to understand that it's not private. What you're doing is not proprietary. It's not private. You don't own it. And we don't actually know what would happen to it if anybody ever challenged what the output was of ChatGPT based on the information that you inputted into ChatGPT.
Yeah, and this one you just touched on, it's not a huge concern. I'll bring it up anyways, is like the idea of proprietary information. Again, gym owners don't do a ton of this stuff in the sense that like your programming of squats and thrusters is not the special sauce that like no one else can ever figure out. Like we got past that in 2009 or so, and we all realized thrusters and pull-ups are all the same. But anyway, but there are situations where proprietary information released into the wild could be a bit of a problem. And I could see, an example that I thought of was, we had a guy, he wrote the definitive guide to OCR, obstacle course race training. Really cool book. Named Rich Borgatti, great guy, great book. Now, this was published a few years back, had he decided to pump that into AI, we have no idea if AI would then start to use that as a resource to tell other people stuff or give other people ideas, and what would happen if pieces of that book started showing up in other people's, like, we don't know, right? So like if it's proprietary, it might be a problem at some point. Am I right there?
Yeah, you are. And that kind of goes down into the rabbit hole of intellectual property and IP protection a little bit, which again, isn't like, I don't know that gym owners are really worried too much about intellectual property, but where this could become an issue is, let's go back to the example of the guy who wrote the book on OCR.
Yeah.
If you can use, like, when Chat first came out, like, everybody was like, I'm using this to write my book. And they would be like, write me a funny book about space aliens or whatever. And then they put that on Amazon and try to sell it and make a lot of money and whatever. But
dozens of dollars.
Yeah, it doesn't. The problem there is what Chat sends back out to you, you do not own. It's not your intellectual property. It's owned by OpenAI, essentially. And so if I'm going to use Chat to write my book, and then I'm going to try to take and copyright that book, I didn't create it. So we walk in, and the court systems are going haywire about this at the moment, because we don't know what to do with it. Or if I go and here's another problem. If I go on to AI and I'm like, hey, create me this marketing plan, and Chat goes out and searches the internet on how to best do a marketing plan for me at my gym, and it starts to take protected intellectual property from somebody else and use it in its output for me, and then I turn around and use it, I've just violated somebody else's intellectual property. Wow. We see this, with images and things like that, where, we've got, it's coming up recently, and I'm not sure if this is an issue that we're going to end up having to talk at some point about, but there are now firms, intellectual property law firms out there that are like scanning the internet for images that gym owners are using on their blog posts and in their marketing and everything else. And like, they downloaded it off of Canva, or maybe they got it from AI or something. And this firm is saying, you did not have the rights to use that in your marketing. You've now, breached copyright. You've infringed on a trademark, something to that effect. But again, this is one of these where we can't pass off the liability now, because we asked Chat to create it. Chat breached somebody else's or infringed on somebody else's intellectual property to give us the answer that we do not own. So we just have to be aware that, like, that's a problem.
Yeah. And I don't, I could see a scenario in 2 years or less where copyright doesn't exist anymore. Like, I don't know how they police that stuff anymore, where like, you can create a song in the style of AC/DC, or give me a space villain in a robot suit with a cape, and it's all Darth Vader. Like these images, like you've seen these ones. I think it was Super Mario or something like that, where someone was publishing stuff like that because every time it would ask for a certain thing, it would create basically a small variation of a copyrighted character or something. Like, I don't know how you police this. It's impossible, and the cart is so far out of, or the horse is so far out of the barn that it doesn't even matter anymore. But in this interim period, I could see some stuff cropping up where you might not want to use some of that. And like the image stuff is crazy. I've seen some of these lawsuits against gyms where these companies will come in and say, you use this image, here is your bill. And it's awful. Like it is it's beyond ruthless. And like, you got to be careful with that stuff for sure. But AI, it creates this gray area where it's like, it created an image based on an image based on an image, but it's still kind of the image and it's still kind of the person and it's still kind of copyrighted and we're not kind of sure. And you still kind of got to pay the legal bill, you know? So it's like one of those things where you got to be really cautious. And we won't dwell on this because we're going to be a little bit more into the risk and stuff that we talk about for gym owners, but this is an interesting one that comes up and we'll have to see where copyright goes. But let's close this out, Matthew. Let's give people, so we've talked about some don'ts and stuff. Let's talk about some things that they can use AI for safely, because I know people, I don't want people to walk out of here saying, I can't ever use this thing again, because it's the hugest tool that's come out in so many years. What can gym owners do? Like, what would you recommend that's a really safe way for them to maximize the use of AI to get ROI on their time?
Yeah. And I appreciate that because I don't always want to be the professional buzzkill.
Even though it's on your business card.
I know. I get on these podcasts, I get on calls, and I'm like, you can't do that. I'm always like, anyway.
Matthew, the fun police has arrived.
I'm not listening to that episode. Matt's just going to kill my spirit again.
Yeah, so let's have some fun. What can we do here? What can gym owners do?
Yeah, again, it's a fantastic tool for education. It's a fantastic tool for research. It's a fantastic tool to sit down at 5:30 at night and start down a rabbit hole that you don't get out of until 8:30 at night. And you're like, what happened?
I know Kung Fu. Yeah.
Right. And I think it's a fantastic way to go and like get ideas. Like I'll do it. I'll even do it in my, I'll have a client call and they'll be like, this is what I want to do. And I'm like, hey chat, this is what, can you give me some ideas here? And then I take, you take that information, you take that education and you turn around and you fit it in with your scope of practice and you become a better business owner or a better trainer as a result of that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that as long as you're staying in your scope of practice, as long as you know that you're increasing your exposure and as long as you're not absorbing liability that you could push off onto other professionals. And I think as long as we're aware of those three things, I mean, I'm blown away by the things that we can do with AI. And I don't think anybody should be shying away from it. Trust but verify the information.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big one then is like stay inside your scope of practice when you're operating. Try not to open yourself up to any additional risk. And try not to like pass off or create liability where you are otherwise protected or where none exists. Those are kind of the three, I think if I'm hearing you, those are the three big rules of this. But aside from that, you can use this thing to do a ton of research, to educate yourself, come up with monster amounts of ideas, format things and make things look a whole lot better than you probably would on your own. You can do an idea here would be like, give me an idea of 15 lines for a Facebook ad that are designed to convert clicks to my gym. And you get just this giant list of stuff. And then you're just like, these three are good. Let's change this. I'm going to refine. And you can do stuff like that all the time. You could definitely like give me newsletter ideas designed to increase engagement on my list of contacts who are not active clients. What do they need to see? So like all sorts of ideas that you can use and then create. And you could even go, in this case, you could even say like, okay, write that newsletter and let's adjust and do that. There's tons of ways you can do this, but where you want to stop is that firm line. We're in baseball playoff season here. You've got the boundaries, the foul lines. Do not go. That's your scope of practice. Do not go out into the dugout area. You want to stay right in the field of play. And you definitely do not want to open yourself up to liability, which might be like not wearing a batting helmet, what I'm talking about, where you take the baseball analogy one step further, but like just try not to absorb any risk by really starting to get weird there. And here's the thing that I'm going to bring up here, Matt, I'm going to blow your horn. You're the guy who can help people with this stuff, the real person who can solve a lot of problems for gym owners. And we bring you on the show because you're so great at helping gym owners put legal stuff in perspective. How can they work with you and what can you do for them?
Yeah. Yeah. So we're just another professional within your professional network. When you were talking about that, I was thinking, you know what, actually what we should do is look at chat as another profession and a professional in our professional network, sort of like an assistant or a research assistant or something like that. If I say, hey, look, you need to refile your LLC as an S corporation, I can say that as an attorney. I'm not going to do it because I'm going to send you over to the CPA to do it. And I think it's, you could ask chat like, how can I better save on my taxes? And it's going to give you a whole bunch of ways to do it. And then you take it to your tax professional in order to implement those tax changes. But that's why your professionals are out there. And I appreciate the softball and the baseball, and I'm going to nail it out of the park. Yeah, the best way to find us, honestly, is just to go to the website, jimlawyers.com. We've got calls to action all over the site. My cell phone's on there. My email address is on there. If you just put any information on any of the calls to action, you'll be forwarded my scheduling calendar to get 45 minutes to just go over all of your different issues. I'll give you another area where I appreciate when a client uses ChatGPT is when, let's say a client, they're like, I want to come up with some sort of XYZ agreement for a staff member or something like that. And instead of us having to sit on the phone for 30 minutes, me asking every question about like, what do you want me to put into this agreement? I've had a couple of times where gym owners would be like, I want to create a staff agreement. And I worked with ChatGPT in order to come up with all the different things that I want to put in my staff agreement. Can you make this legal?
There you are.
And I'm like,
example.
Great.
Yeah.
that made my life really easy. Yeah. And so, yeah, anywhere on the website, we use ChatGPT to come up with our other firm, our new gym selling firm, Gym Ventures. We used it to come up with a name. We were like, here's what we want to do. What do we call this? And we got like 10 different names, and we were like, Gym Ventures sounds pretty cool.
I like that. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tool. It's out there. You can use it. Be cautious. Come to jimlawyers.com and we'll chat about ways that you can do cool things in the legal without exposing yourself through AI.
And that's really the key of it. We'll just seal it up with the example. You're like, hey, I don't know where to start. Just opening a gym. I don't know what can you give me a checklist of documents a gym would need to operate legally? And then you take that to Matt and say, which of these can you help me with? And Matt says, all of these, and away we go. Stuff like that, right? That's where you can start using these things. But again, vet the information. Talk to your professionals. Don't assume there's no liability. And for God's sake, stay within your scope of practice. That's the same as it ever was, 1972, 2028, whatever year it's going to be. Keep that in mind. Stay within your scope of practice. Matthew, thanks so much for sharing your information with us. We'll have you back on here when the next legal issue pops up, probably in a month or two.
We'll be back on to talk about not using images in your blogs anymore because you're going to get that $2,500 settlement demand from the intellectual property firm that's tracking everybody down.
I saw a settlement demand, Matthew, that was literally, it was 6 figures, and the guy said, I can't pay. And the counter offer was whatever is in your bank account. It was awful. So eventually we'll hit copyright, but not right now. Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, that was gym lawyer Matthew Becker. He's at jimlawyers.com, and Gym Ventures, that's his new one. So if you have any of those interests or needs, check that out and talk to Matthew. Thanks for listening. This is Run a Profitable Gym. Please hit subscribe on your way out the door. I'm your host, Mike Warkentin, as always, with thanks. Please check the show out next week. We'll have something great for you, and Chris Cooper will be on. Speaking of him, here's Chris Cooper with a final message.
Hey, it's Two Brain founder Chris Cooper with a quick note. We created the Gym Owners United Facebook group to help you run a profitable gym. Thousands of gym owners just like you have already joined. In the group, we share sound advice about the business of fitness every day. I answer questions, I run free webinars, and I give away all kinds of great resources to help you grow your gym. I'd love to have you in that group. It's Gym Owners United on Facebook, or go to gymownersunited.com to join. Do it today.